Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CSR Marketplace Live session this afternoon on how to promote diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the hybrid workplace. We are going to give everyone a minute to get into our Zoom room. I see our attendees joining now, so we'll just give everyone a minute to get through the waiting room and into the session. We are glad that you could join us here this afternoon. While you're joining the session, you can go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. I know some of you have been in sessions with us yesterday and earlier today, but it's helpful for the panelists to know who's here. So if you want to head over to the chat and introduce yourself, that would be helpful for all of us. So welcome to the CSR Marketplace Live. As many of you might know, these are pre-conference sessions with our partners in the CSR field, and we appreciate Visit.org's support of ACCP and of our conference and for being here today for this session. We are in Zoom, as you all well know. We will have the live transcript turned on, so if you would like that feature, you can migrate to the bottom of your screen and view full transcript. You can also hide the subtitles if that is easier for you, but that accessibility feature is available if it is helpful. So we will be using chat to engage. So I see some of you are already saying hello. If you haven't already, head over to the chat and just introduce yourself. That's helpful for the panelists to know who's on the call. At any point in time, feel free to use the chat to add to the conversation, talk to each other. We welcome that interaction. We will make time for questions during the session and at the end, so feel free to add your questions at any point in time in the Q&A box. It's helpful if you keep your questions in the Q&A box and your comments in the chat. It's just easier for the speakers to see the questions, and they'll be taking those towards the end of the session, but you can feel free to enter your question at any time. We will be making a recording of the session along with any supporting materials available to you. So know that that will be coming to you probably mid next week at the latest. So you will have some follow-up from the session. And as I mentioned, the CSR Marketplace Live sessions are pre-conference events for our virtual conference, which is taking place December 7th through 9th. So hopefully we will see all of you back with us here on Zoom in early December. So with that, I want to kick it off to this session today. We have a panel, so we have several folks joining us today. I'm going to hand it off to Jerry Navarrete from Visit.org, who's going to get us started and introduce our panelists. So Jerry, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erica, and welcome everyone. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon for this very meaningful conversation that we're going to have on how to promote diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the hybrid workplace in partnership with Association of Corporate Citizenship Professionals and Visit.org. So my name is Jerry, and I'm an event host here at Visit.org. And we at Visit are an enterprise SaaS company delivering purpose for a more engaged workforce. With its proprietary content across 90+ countries, Visit.org is providing the infrastructure and content for purpose-driven employee and client engagement. And some of our customers include Best Buy, Colgate, ADP, Adobe, Twilio, Twitch, IBM, Nielsen, Fidelity, and many others. So on behalf of the Visit.org team, we really thank you all for being here and partaking in this discussion. There is no doubt that diversity has become one of the most important facets that inspire better company culture, a more engaged workforce, and a thriving business. Now more than ever, corporations are focused on how to appeal to job seekers while also exploring new strategies that help retain their employees. There is an overwhelming amount of data that shows how diversity and inclusion improves a company's revenue, innovation, engagement, and employee happiness. And you all probably already know because you're all professionals in this network, but I really wanted to highlight a 2021 Glassdoor survey shows that 76% of job seekers value diversity when evaluating job offers. Another fact also demonstrated that diverse and inclusive businesses are nearly twice as likely to be innovation leaders in their market. So as we move forward into a new era of work, we've had to pivot, into these hybrid workplace setups. Company leaders are being asked to strongly consider their responsibility in implementing sustainable DE&I programs that support these unfolding hybrid models in order to create a safe and accepting environment, deepen team relationships, promote a healthy work-life balance, and not the least, demonstrate a company's commitment to serving their workers and their community's needs, of course. So in this discussion, we are very excited. We have invited a panel of corporate social responsibility and diversity, inclusion and equity and belonging leaders from Fortune 1000 enterprises. And they're really here today to share with us how their own experiences have influenced their company's workplace culture and how you can also help impact your company's values to help develop CSR and DEIB programs that really create engaging and accepting purpose-driven workplace. So I'm very excited to be joined by Karen Perham-Lipman, who is the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Program Manager at Lumen Technologies. We also have Sarah Hussain from Global, and who is the Global Director of Diversity and Inclusion at ResMed. And last but not least, we also have Cindy Lee, who is the Senior Corporate Social Responsibility Coordinator at Paul Hastings. So I really want to welcome Karen, Sarah, and Cindy, and really thank you all for accepting this invitation and for taking the time to be here with us today to share your knowledge. So we really want to maximize this time together. I know that we have a very limited amount of time, and I really want to kick us off, with the following discussion as we just jump right into the topic. We know that 2020 has changed the workplace landscape, and we really had to pivot in many ways, not only in our personal and also in our professional lives. And we know that the hybrid models are really here to stay, which gives us an opportunity to bring awareness to what inequities hybrid work can potentially create or exacerbate. So I really want to ask you, and I think I'd like to hand this off first to Sarah, and then we'll hear from Cindy and Karen. Based on the switch to hybrid remote work, what strategies have you all had to update in order to be proactive about your diversity and inclusion and CSR initiatives? So I'd love to hear from Sarah first and really just get this conversation started. So welcome.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you everyone so much for being here. I know that you all have very busy schedules and competing Zoom meetings. So it really says a lot that you're taking time to lean into this conversation. This is something dear to my heart. I've been in the inclusion and diversity, and I'll just say D&I going forward. But the D&I space, it's about 2015, and I've seen it evolve. And as we've seen post George Floyd, there's been more attention. And with COVID, companies have really had to take a step back and think about their strategy. So number one, Jerry, to your question, is the intention and the strategy. What does employee engagement look like? What is it really going to take to retain? What are our employees looking for? I think this is the first time in a very long time where employees have the upper hand. As was mentioned in the intro, employees are asking about diversity, but they're not only asking about diversity, they're actually asking about culture. They're asking, what does this company value? What is your stance on inclusion? How are you going to make me feel like I belong? And so companies are having to ask harder questions now and bake that into how they communicate. They have to bake that into their policies. So you have to bake that into your employee handbook, into your code of conduct. And so number one is thinking about, as a company, where does our stance? Bake that into your policies, make sure it's part of your leadership talk track. So if you are moving towards this hybrid model and you want to give your workers flexibility, make sure that that's trickling down. A lot of it's the people leaders, it's your managers making sure that they're communicating that. And then when it comes to the employee engagement, or in terms of building inclusion, how you lead effective meetings and how you make sure that people feel like they belong is the second part of all this, making sure that if you are on a Zoom call, how are you being communicated with? Are you being asked to speak? Are your opinions being heard? Are you feeling respected and valued? And again, it goes back to intention. Leaders have to make more of an effort to lead effectively in a culture that is struggling to really champion inclusion, because it's really hard in this hybrid workspace in order to be able to respect and meet everyone where they're at. So I'm just going to start there and say that it goes with intention, it goes baked into your policies and practices, and then how your leaders are communicating that out.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. I love how you say it begins with that intention. And so that's what we're all here to do today. And that's what the common thread is here, that intention. And we're all here to do good. And so Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and Cindy as well, and just kind of open it up, to both of you.
I can tag on to that. Thank you, Sarah. That's it's a great place to start. You always have to start with your intention. If you're not, starting from the right place, you're not gonna create the types of programs and engagements for your employees that are really gonna, really hit home for them. I think for me, I'm gonna be a little bit more tactical since I don't work directly in D&I. I work in CSR, but I also serve as a leader for our Asian ERG group here. And so I'm able to sit at, you know, a bird's eye view of, I know what the toolboxes are in our CSR department that we can leverage across to our DEI department as well. So in that sense, with COVID, with all the calls for racial justice, social justice, and all that the past year, we've had to really look at how do we collaborate, you know, not just reactively, but how do we plan ahead to collaborate ahead. CSR is corporate social responsibility. Sorry for that. Normally that encompasses charitable giving, volunteerism, sustainability, and the like. So similar goals of social impact, but slightly different, parallel tracks. And so what we did was I took my CSR toolbox and I worked with our D&I department, said, hey, these are the things that we can work with you on for all of your events. You know, each of your awareness month, for Black History Month, for Asian Pacific Heritage Month, for Hispanic Heritage Month. We have charitable giving. We have a platform for employee giving, gift matching. You can use that. You can select a charity that is selected by your ERG leaders to donate to. We can highlight, we have virtual volunteering opportunities through our contract with visit.org. Your leaders can select a virtual volunteering opportunity to host during that month on top of, you know, what other D&I programming you have, what speakers you bring in. So it's kind of bringing this full house approach to working together across the firm to really bring D&I strategies to life and really create that culture together.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I just want to say how excited I am to be here with everyone, talking about two of my favorite things, which is equity and inclusion and corporate social responsibility. I currently lead DEIB programs at Lumen, but I've also served in a role with Comcast NBC overseeing CSR. So two things I'm really passionate about. So I love being here with all of you, and for our attendees, thank you for being so committed to having this conversation and thinking about how you can drive this in your workplaces. Within Lumen, as we thought through transitioning to that remote hybrid environment, we moved 75% of our workforce to remote, being very thoughtful and intentional about supporting them in the pandemic for their safety and also for the safety of our customers and communities. So that requires a lot of communication and a lot of thoughtful educational awareness programming so that employees understand these changes and how that impacts them, and also thinking about the equity piece. And I don't want to repeat everything that was already said, so I'll give a couple examples maybe. One of the things that we did within Lumen with our employee resource groups was to help create educational awareness events to talk about the vaccine and the virus, so our employees could understand more about that. And we partnered with our benefits partners to bring in experts so that we could talk about all sides of vaccine education and the virus and education around that, and also give space for employees to ask those questions where there is stigma associated with the vaccine and the virus itself. And that was a really important part of our communication process in terms of thinking through hybrid. And then, like many other organizations, we're driving DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging across all of our organizational strategies, talent development, talent management, hiring, interviewing, all of that. And it's systemic, our work. But from a hybrid perspective, I think it shows up even more so when you think about how you're creating opportunities for employees to connect and to come together. And, part of that is creating spaces, especially when the pandemic began, for people to show up and just be able to talk about how they're feeling. So there was a lot of work that we did to come together and just start off meetings and conversations by, how are you doing? And working with our leaders to create resources and tools for listening so that we could have listening conversations, especially as things began to escalate with social injustice. As we saw that happen throughout 2019 and continue, or 2020 and continue, it's still continuing today. I just think recently earlier in the year around Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And, there's a lot of conversation there following, that followed Black History Month, and so many more conversations that employees want to have. So that means helping ensure that our leaders and our organizational members are equipped to have open, honest, authentic conversations, listening conversations, and create space for employees to share how they're feeling and how they're impacted by these changes. And that includes hybrid remote work. That creates anxiety and disconnect. And so that's important too. So I would add the communication piece and creating space for open dialogue.
You, Cindy, and Sarah as well. And I think what I'm hearing is, Sarah, you were saying intention. Cindy, I love that you were saying that you're integrating, this integrated approach between DEI and CSR to really advocate for these DEI practices, not only within the company internal community, but also external communities. And of course, Karen, you adding that communication piece to really allow for that cultural cohesion within the workplace to still maintain is really important. That really brings me to my next question you brought about communication, really being human about, how we speak to each other within our company. So do you all have any practical advice for other D&I and CSR professionals on how to encourage, employees to really bring those concerns and interests to leadership, and having these open conversations? And I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that because I think you brought up a really good point, Karen.
Absolutely. Well, so I have the wonderful benefit of getting to work with our employee resource groups across the organization. We have 11, and they cover all different identities you can think of. But of course, we as individuals have great intersectionality in terms of our identities. So our employees will join multiple employee resource groups. So I'll start just in that space in talking about strategy. About 16% of our global workforce are members in our ERGs. And also because of the allyship. And so what that means is they're helping to create space in our organization where they help us drive our diverse talent attraction strategies, our talent development strategies, helping us work on inclusive leadership strategies and creating spaces for employees to be able to come and talk about things. And in one way that can be beneficial because that can be a channel for employees to bring up those different concerns or questions or even innovative ideas. And to give you a very specific example, within our Pride employee resource group, which is our LGBTQ employee population and allies, we had a request come through where an employee was feeling really frustrated about some of our processes and policies related to transitioning. And they funneled this up through our Pride group, and our Pride group come to us and say, we had an employee who wanted to go through name transition and our systems made that difficult. And so that enabled us to take a look at that and think about how can we improve that so that that employee has a better experience on their journey, but then also future employees who are going through that transition also have the benefit of having that be really focused on helping them feel included and supporting them in that journey. So that was a great example of where that, feedback could come through and we could address it. One more unique suggestion that came through that I think was really important and helped us to make change on a global organizational level was employees came back through the Pride group and said, we want care providers in our EAP partner that have the unique qualities to have conversations with us if we have children in our families who are talking about coming out or have LGBTQ concerns. And so that enabled us to go back to our EAP partners and work with them to help identify providers within the system that are uniquely qualified to have those conversations and to be able to support our employees in that way. So I provide that example, but I would also say separate of our ERGs, a huge part of making that difference is helping drive empathy and inclusive leadership. Empathy and sympathy are not the same thing. Empathy drives connection and sympathy creates disconnect. And so part of how you can make those changes and create spaces where employees can bring up ideas, suggestions, questions is working with your leaders to help create and foster empathy. And that then supports connection and inclusion.
I'm happy to share a little bit. So what I do is I bring similar to Karen, the ERGs report to me, and I work with them on their annual plan and their strategy and their budgets. So I bring them together once a month, and that space is just for us to kind of talk through any challenges, any pain points, any wins, any observations. I also meet with each leader monthly. But one of the first things I did was have them meet with our chief HR officer, CPO, for an hour. And so she gave each leader time to hear from them directly. What are the community's needs? What are the objectives? Whether it's talent retention, acquisition, recruiting, networking, all of that. And so making sure that the CHRO or the CPO heard directly from our ERG leaders, and also invite her to every single event. I know that's very challenging for a lot of our execs to make, but making sure that she's across everything that's happening, and that if she has any questions, that she knows who to tap from that community. And so giving them that kind of visibility at the C-suite really helps. And so that's just kind of, a lot of what Karen said. I definitely don't want to repeat, because Karen really encapsulated it fully, but just creating that space to make sure that they know that their CDO, their CSR rep is an ally and is a champion. And also making sure that you have executive sponsors that are involved. A lot of executive sponsors just carry the title, but I actually put it on their calendars to meet with their ERG leader every quarter. And that's established from the minute they take on that 1-year commitment. And then I also meet with them every quarter as well and ask for their accountability and their update. And I also ask them to do an event each year. So as in for another ERG. So not only attend their ERG that they're a sponsor of, but also support other ERGs. So to kind of create that synergy and that sense of community and support across the company.
Thanks. Cindy, I know you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I love that, Sarah. And I love how you kind of tie them together to really bring together the kind of sense of intersectionality, because you may identify as a woman, but you may also identify as part of another ERG group. So I love that. And just to kind of build on that, the visibility, the communication, something that we do that I can add on that. Sarah's looking at it from top down. What we do here also is we look at it from the moment you join the firm. We like to host CSR and DEI new hire orientations. So we do them once a quarter, where we bring everyone who was hired during that quarter together, and it puts a face to a name. So you're not just emailing, especially in the remote world where some of our new hires may never have even stepped into our office yet. They've never met anyone. So it's more than just a name they're emailing or an inbox, to CSR or DEI. They get to meet each of the leaders of our ERGs, as well as myself and my manager and the diversity team as well. So they know us, they see our faces. We let them know that, hey, we're here for you. If you guys ever want to have a chat about anything, if you want to bring any issues, if you don't know who to go to bring the issues to, you can come to us and we'll help you connect with the right people. So communication is key, making those connections, remembering that, we're all human, and at the end of the day, we're going to trust and feel safer when we see a face connected to a name.
I love that. I love everything that you've all added, empathy, that human connection. And we've got some questions coming in the chat that I'm in the Q&A, and I'd love to make space for that. And so there's some really great questions that I'd love to give time to answer. So we have here a question pertaining to the ERGs. How do you ensure that it doesn't become a burden for ERGs to hold the responsibility for advancing issues to leaders? I thought that was a great point that they brought up.
Yeah, this comes up a lot. I've yet to meet an ERG leader that's not burned out. They, and I have so much respect for anyone who steps in to be an ERG leader, because you have a full-time job, full-time life, and you're taking on building a community at a company. And that's a lot of work and responsibility. It does take a certain personality too, that I've seen that can step into this. You just have a lot of passion and really care. So I want to make sure, one thing I try to do is I try to give back to my ERG leaders. There's number one, I'm constantly validating them, constantly acknowledging their efforts. So just to make sure that they feel appreciated and that what they're bringing to ResMed as a company is driving value. And then number two, I create leadership sessions. Like I'll bring in someone to talk about how to motivate a team. And so kind of making sure that I'm consistently upskilling them. so they know that they are getting something out of this. They are flexing their leadership skills. They are getting support. They are also getting visibility at the top. So that's a big part of it. And then there are small wins. You know, whenever we have conference tickets or events, I always start with my ERG leaders to make sure that they know that we appreciate what you're doing. Would you like to attend this event? Of course, the holidays are coming up, making sure that there's a nice recognition, end of year acknowledgement party that I'm throwing for my ERGs and their board members. So these are just small things that we try to do to help them stay motivated, to know that they are valued, and that what they're bringing to the company is just, it's invaluable and it's appreciated.
So much of what Sarah's doing, I'm also doing. So I definitely won't repeat that. And those are all important strategies that you are implementing, Sarah. And you're right. Doing this work in the equity inclusion space can definitely create a sense of burnout. And for those who represent a particular identity in a group, then people who see themselves represented by that person are going to them and to ask them for that specific support. And it can be a lot. So just like you, many of the same things, a few things slightly different. One of the things that I did in this past year is to ensure that we had engaged executive sponsors at the global level for all the ERGs. And so that person helps me to drive those strategies for our business resource groups, but it also provides another space for them to go to for leadership coaching, feedback, and support in that way. I do a lot of that with them, but this is also someone in the organization who's highly visible at a leadership level. So that's an additional support from that perspective. And then each year I do a summit with them. So they do get to go to conferences and different things like that from our recruiting partners, say like Afrotech or, Fairy God Boss and things like that. But I do an annual summit with them, which in COVID, I had to transition to remote. And initially it was a few days in person and we would bring everyone together. In remote, it was obviously virtual. But that whole summit is my love letter to them. It's designed to help them come together, network, meet each other. They're globally making impact. Many of them don't necessarily get the chance to know who each other are. Yes. And also it's all focused on helping them develop and grow. So one of the things I did for the first summit in the pandemic was bring in internal partners, benefits partners, to share information and resources and have authentic conversations on anxiety, on mental health. What does this look like in the pandemic? How do I navigate this? What are some tools for resiliency? How do, once we realized this was kind of feeling like it was not ending, initially we're like, oh, it's a few weeks, a couple months, and then it wasn't. How do I sustain in this? How do I move forward connecting others when I'm feeling disconnected? So that was really important. And then just having regular conversations and opportunities for them to get together and talk, like a virtual happy hour-ish type opportunity, which they now are doing across their ERGs. Because sometimes you just need to be able to come together and connect. And there doesn't need to be an agenda or a purpose other than to, be together, right? Mm-hmm. We're always so focused on bottom lines, agendas, itineraries. Sometimes we just need to be human.
I love how you both mentioned that, giving that accessibility and agency, because ultimately, they're advocating, for this and in a way, kind of giving them that feeling of value and the additional resources. It just creates that additional support. I have another question here from an attendee. They're saying, I'm interested in creating a DEI committee at my organization. Any tips on how to do so?
I built a global council. I'm not sure if you're thinking something global, but I'll share with you my experience. What I did was I wanted, ResMed's in 40 countries, and I wanted to be able to capture perspectives from each region. So I put out a form to apply to be on what I call a BIDS council. BID stands for Belonging, Inclusion, Diversity for Success. So it's my BIDS Global Council. And so I asked for different industries, different parts of the world, and I wanted to have representatives from each region, as well as representatives from each ERG, not their chair, because their chair already meets with me, is the face of the org. I wanted the chair to either nominate someone or have someone else from the board be on the BIDS Council. And we meet every 2 months, and they help me drive my strategy. They help me with information distribution. They give me insights on who are my movers and shakers in each region, who would be youth allies. And because I've made it very intentional to have someone from user experience, someone from engineering, someone from manufacturing, I was very intentional about building a board that represented different wings of the business and all parts around the globe. And the challenge with that, though, is that time zones. So I will have my meeting, the same meeting twice in one day, and the notes go out to everybody, our Teams channels for everybody, our email aliases for everyone. Because of that, we do have to have it staggered twice a day. But I will say it's brought a lot of people together that would have never met. And, it's been a great way for us to push our agenda and think about it even more broadly. Because of that, I was able to go and present in Japan or Singapore. I was able to be pulled into different projects and know about things I wouldn't have known about. So it's just a good way to kind of expand the D&I footprint.
I created something somewhat like that. I call it Connecting for Collaboration, and it is a group of global representatives. I tapped into different areas of the business, so HR, employee experience, all the components within HR, and we come together as a group so that, one, like Sarah said, I can have insight into the work happening in our global regions, and then also help drive our diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging strategies across the global regions. It also helps me just in terms of my thinking. Some things make sense, obviously hyper-localized in one location and not so much in another. We do many of our diversity awareness campaigns. We launch them globally. We partner for virtual volunteering across the globe. Those might look differently in a different region, and I need to hear that feedback, so I help make sure I'm addressing unique employee needs. One of the things we're working on right now is developing D&I councils for the business units, so we can really get at driving some of the changes that need to happen systemically around employees in terms of inclusion within the business orgs and hiring and things like that. And what I would say from that perspective is be very clear about what those member roles and responsibilities are, because I have found that there are always people who want to help. They are so happy to help you make a difference and make impact, but it can feel frustrating for them when you tap them and you haven't helped them understand how they can help you. So really be sure that you're intentional and thoughtful about how they can help you drive that change. In terms of having insight into a part of the organization where, like Sarah and I are not spending our time regularly, that's valuable. So be sure about what they can help do specifically. Because the worst thing is to sign up for something to help make a difference and then not really know what you're supposed to do in doing that,
That, Karen. We have another question, and I think, Cindy, this would be a great question here. We have DI seems to be focused in HR. How do we expand that in other business functions? And I know that you mentioned kind of how CSR and DI actually overlap and they intersect. So Cindy, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that question here. I'd like to give you that space.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, everyone. I turned my video because my internet connection was a little unstable. So hopefully you can all hear me all right. Something that our firm and I think a lot of companies are really trying to expand outside of being just siloed to a DEI department. I think the success of DEI kind of in my viewpoint rests on being able to
Cindy, you're cutting out a little bit.
Not HR, okay.
Cindy, can you hear us? Sorry, your audio was cutting in and out. I don't know if you want to submit that in the chat.
Can you hear me
and then we can
now?
No, I think we might, if you wouldn't mind adding that to that chat, because we definitely want to hear your feedback. And then Sarah, I don't know if you or Karen had anything to add.
Sorry, was it a different question? I'm sorry, I apologize.
No worries. So the question was, how can we expand? So the DEI technically, or most often, is looked at as like part of the HR department, but how can we expand that to different parts of the business?
I don't think, I think it's a pet peeve of mine that everyone automatically assumes that D&I is under HR. I think a lot of companies, some people have their CDO reporting directly to their CEO. For some, it can sit under strategy. So for some, it sits under HR. Because I think historically it was viewed as part of a people practice, but when companies now are digging deeper into what inclusion means, they realize it is a business vertical. Karen, I'm sure you'd probably agree with me. Maybe you'd say that we're kind of like internal consultants. We're going to think about inclusion across the business. And so for many, it is an HR function, and that's okay. But I would never want to limit your D&I professional, your D&I team to just being viewed as an HR function. It could be viewed in a standalone department, or it could be viewed under strategy or any other department. So I think it really depends on the business. What's the product, what are they doing, and how they are structured.
Yeah, yes. I've been working in this space for over a decade and in social responsibility. And I know this was the same thing that came up in talking about social responsibility and where does that sit and how is that a part of the organization? And really that's a part of the whole organization. We've had enough research and data at this point in the space of corporate social responsibility to understand it's a business strategy. It helps you grow revenue. It helps you bring in new customers. It helps you make an impact on a global scale or on a local scale if you're a small business. And the same thing can be said for work in diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging. That's a business strategy. It is really important that we create spaces where humans feel like they're a part of, and we have to do that in thinking about creating diverse workforces too. And diverse workforces are also diverse perspectives, diverse ideas, diverse educational backgrounds, diverse experiences. I share oftentimes, I've been doing this work for a long time, but I used to be a molecular geneticist. I was a scientist. That's a very strange career trajectory in terms of the work I've done in nonprofit, government, aerospace, telecom, technology, but all those unique experiences help me in terms of the work that I do, and that's valuable. So that kind of diversity is also important. So diversity is everyone's responsibility. And part of the work of, Sarah and myself and Cindy and her, work in D&I is to help others understand we all have to take ownership in this work if we're going to make a difference. So it might sit in a specific area, but part of our effort is to help all parts of the organization feel like they have a role in helping drive it.
Yeah, one thing I'm trying to do is not use the word program. A lot of times when I was hired, they're like, our D&I program, our program. I'm like, it's not a program. Because program implies like a start or end date. And I'm like, it's actually a practice. It needs to be baked in and built in across the business. I always joke when I deliver my trainings that the goal is for people like Karen and I to be out of a job, like that you wouldn't actually,
yes.
This just automatically happens. And so, that's the thing, is that when it does becomes everyone's responsibility and everyone kind of thinks with an inclusive lens, and that's the goal, right?
Right.
Yes. In a perfect world, Sarah
right.
and I are totally unnecessary. We get to go do some other awesome thing inside. Yeah, exactly.
Right. You fire yourselves from the role because everyone's practicing, right? That diversity. I love that. Diversity is everyone's responsibility. I love all these. I can hashtag all of these nuggets that y'all are dropping here. So I know we have a couple more minutes, and really I just wanted to, let's see here. We have a couple questions in the chat going back to supporting ERG leaders. How can you prepare, and how do you support ERG leaders to be sure they are prepared and have the skill set to field issues that may need to be elevated to leaders? And I think that's similar to what you had answered earlier. And I don't know if we can succinctly answer that.
From my experience, a lot of the ERG leaders who step in have been on a board. They understand what the objectives are. I think spending time on aligning on the objectives and what the community's needs are, I think starting with surveying what your community's wants and needs are is really important, and then working with them on a realistic plan. I think something I've seen is that they're like, we're going to do one event a month. No, you're not. You're not going to do one event a month. That means every 3 weeks you're putting something out, and that's a lot. You will be burned out in 3 months. So we're having realistic conversations around what you can and cannot take on, and where are the places you can collaborate with other ERGs or collaborate even internally with other departments, whether it's talent development or talent acquisition, and using your time and resources strategically to drive your objective, meet the business strategy, meet the ERG strategy, and also balance out the burnout. So I will say a lot of it's a lot of coaching. I don't know, Karen, what do you think?
Yes, definitely. I would say, just like Sarah, I've created some fairly comprehensive and thoughtful guidelines, budgets, resources, materials, all kinds of things that help them feel supported and give them direction and guidance in their work. And then they know they're not alone in that. Like ideally, they have a unique experience. They can provide support for an employee who wants to talk about something or share, but we also need to help them because they're not experts in they're not a benefits expert, let's say, or an expert in other areas of the organization. So we don't want them to feel that they've had to take on the ownership of that role, because that's not what they're there for. So it also means engaging them, and Sarah mentioned it, in partnership with other parts of the organization. One of the things I've been really driving this past year with our ERGs is that intersectionality piece, really collaborating with other ERGs so that they're not alone in the work, they're partnering with other ERGs to do impactful work. I'll give you a great example of an event we did earlier this year that was well received and hugely impactful. Our Pride ERG and our Veterans ERG partnered to host an educational event around the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. The history of it, what it means for the Pride members and allies, what it means as a veteran. And we had employees who are members of the LGBTQ community, but were also veterans, talk about their experience and what that meant. So we were able to bring education, awareness, perspectives, and learning and development, and they were able to partner together. We brought in their executive sponsors and worked together to bring that out to our employees. And then also just partnering internally with our different parts of the organization. We work with our benefits a lot because there's a lot of opportunity to showcase those, but also to remind employees that they're available. It could be tuition reimbursement. It could be all of our learning and development resources, our LMS platform and certifications and upskilling. So they don't have to do that work by themselves. We can do it in partnership with, let's say, talent management. So I think those are some key things that help them.
Thank you for Sarah and Karen for adding to that. And I know that we're getting close to the end of our time here. And really, I just want to have all three of you really give us a quick, in 30 seconds, what is the main message that you would like the audience to take away from this discussion? So Cindy, I know that you were having internet issues. I'd like to give you space as well. So hop on in if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful.
Sorry about that earlier, everyone.
No worries.
I think my biggest takeaway, especially with my personal experience being an ERG leader and working in CSR, working hand in hand with DEI, and I think it's in the chat already, is that diversity is everyone's responsibility. And the more that we can share that responsibility, the less of a burden we will be on our ERG leaders and our DEI department.
Beautiful. Thank you. Sarah?
DEI is limitless. You come into running a D&I program or partnering with your D&I program, it can go from everything to the product you're making, to the packaging, to the accessibility. I often feel like I'm what is the expression, to get my head cut off, because my to-do list is 2 pages long. I need to follow up on our inclusive language initiative. I need to do this, I need to do that. And so when you meet a D&I practitioner, don't underestimate how much they're thinking about. It's not just the ERGs. It's not just, Black History Month or International Women's Day. It actually runs deeper. It's about partnering with benefits. It's about your policies. It's about your global policies. It's about accessibility and IT. And so everyone is a D&I partner. And going back to the theme of this panel, which is, everyone's responsibility, it's every department's responsibility. And I think when we're engaging with different departments, asking them, how do they view inclusion in what they do? how are they driving? How are they making their vertical more inclusive? These are the kind of questions we should be asking of our business partners and our stakeholders. So that's just something I want to say. So it's really widen your understanding of business inclusion and inclusion development at your company. And diversity to me comes after inclusion. Once you have a very strong inclusive culture, then you can really form a strong practice around how to foster diversity.
Thank you. I know we only have 1 minute left. So Karen, just love to hear from you. And then before I hand it back to Erica.
Yeah, no, I would definitely echo some of the things that Sarah said, and I am in full agreement. If you're doing inclusion work, then diversity follows. It's not something you have to force or push. And again, diversity means a lot of things. It's not just about demographics. Like, let's not get hung up on that. For me, very much like what Sarah said across the business, I'll give you a great example. Earlier this year, it came to me, that we need to be talking about the whole human in our organizations, especially wellness. One of the things I did was to partner with our benefits and HR teams, because they, were looking at challenges to address, increasing use of EAP and some of our other benefits resources. And that is also critical when you think about hiring, attraction, engagement, so many things related to whole human. So I actually launched a wellbeing ERG earlier this year that focuses on the financial, emotional, and physical wellness of our whole humans. And it's intersectional with every other identity. So it provides opportunity to partner across our employee resource group network, but then also across the business. I had a leader say to me, well, what does wellness have to do with inclusion? Earlier in the year, and that stuck with me and frustrated me. It is all about inclusion. If your whole self doesn't feel supported and included and welcome and able to authentically be your whole self, are you included? So I think we need to look at this work and the fact that we're not doing it with widgets in businesses and organizations. We're doing it with people. And then lastly, I would say, because we're here also talking about CSR, that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and CSR they have the same goal. So they partner together, and their goal is to connect disenfranchised communities and bring new insight and create collaboration and innovation to ensure that we have solutions that make change happen. So if you're doing DEI work, you're doing CSR work, you should be doing that work together.
Collaborating together. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies. I know I'm going to hand it off to Erica, and really just, thank you all for being here in the audience for these amazing questions. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but thank you once again it's been such a privilege to host you all. And I'd love to, continue this conversation. I hope that this inspires you to continue these conversations within your organization. So I'd love to pass it over to Erica, who's going to just briefly close it up. I know we've kind of gone over time, so I really appreciate, everyone's patience with this. So thank you, Erica. Go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, no, it's always sad to shut down such a great conversation, and there's so much engagement in the chat and the Q&A. Jerry, I want to thank you and visit.org for being with us and being part of our CSR Marketplace Live, and for pulling together such a great panel. And Sarah and Karen and Cindy, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise this afternoon. Really great conversation. So many more things to say. So I will second what Jerry said, take this conversation and continue it in your organizations with your networks. There is a link to a survey in the chat. If you would take just a minute and fill that out, that's helpful for all of us to get feedback on the session today. And again, be on the lookout for the recordings and the follow-up resources by mid next week. But thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the attendees, and again to the panelists. And we really appreciate it, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have
a wonderful day. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.